All right,
All
Max,
right.
welcome.
Back again, baby.
All right, well,
Nostr News.
I like a few things in housekeeping for me,
Yeah.
because this is sort of the setup. Is I know that if you've watched, Mr. Beast, kind of the king of YouTube, has been on a bit of a press tour recently, and one of the things he says is just like make one thing better about each video you make.
Okay.
Now he's not really a live streamer, but there's a few things better here. So we've got 1080p. We've upgraded the def, and then we've also got our mic stands. So it's a little bit nicer than having to hold it the whole time. So you can
Free
smile
hands.
and wave and gesticulate all you want.
Oh yeah, gesticulate, baby.
So we've been keeping this list. It was last Wednesday that we first got on and did this. And it was so much fun. We were like, let's do it again. And I think you've got a trip coming up.
Yeah, I've got a trip actually to Costa Rica. Some other Bitcoiners gonna be down there talking about Lightning. I'm sure Nostr will come up too, but that's right.
What is the why Costa Rica? Is there some center of gravity there?
It's interesting. I mean, it does seem like there's a lot of folks. I don't know on this specific trip, but it does seem like now with the Nostr Rica, whatever it's called, and I do know there are a lot of folks living down there, and I guess people like Pura Vida. They like to surf.
Yeah. And wasn't there? There's an account I've seen, Bitcoin Jungle. Is that a Costa Rica focused? I'm
super stoked. I don't think I'll have time on this trip. This is a relatively short trip, but I definitely would love to go to Nostr Rica. In fact, just kind of shout out to the audience. I have not yet booked my place.
Oh yeah.
If anyone has any great recommendations, like I started to look for places to stay, but let me know where y'all are all staying. I'd like to get a place soon, but. I want to make that a little bit of a longer trip because I think Uvita, where that conference is kind of close to Bitcoin Jungle. And what I've heard is that it's kind of like, Bitcoin Beach. It's everyone accepts Lightning Network and it should be really cool.
Oh, cool. And what's the rest of Uvita like? Have you looked at it? Is it a surf town? Is it a inland? Or?
I honestly have no idea. I know that, all of Costa Rica is supposed to be good for surfing. Or there's like Santa Teresa, which is another big surf town. I don't think it's that far away, but.
Right.
Yeah. We'll find out.
Yeah.
And you're coming too, no?
I think so. I'm trying to figure out travel plans and the rest of, we have some other details to work around. But I was telling Jen yesterday, I was like, I really want to go to this. So can we, nail it down where we're going to be,
We should potentially get a place together if
you're
down.
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah. Or if somebody's got
someone's
a
got a spot for us,
we're taking Rex. Exactly. So let us know. So you were saying, you're traveling to Costa Rica, and so what I was saying is, typically we were kind of trying to hit a weekly cadence. Yeah. At least, because I think we just had so much fun when we did it last Wednesday.
Too much fun.
But with you traveling to Costa Rica now, we're going to we just bumped it up a couple days to kind of lighten the pressure. But I am going to. I don't think I told you that I am going to live stream with Artur.
Amazing. When?
On Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific.
Let's go.
So he and I, we made a video together, non-live stream, like maybe 2 weeks ago about titled Nostr Search, and I think he's just like deep into thinking about that and excited about it.
I love it.
And I think he's just like one of the great thinkers on this stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let's hang again. So then we hung again this morning, but I was kind of set up for this. I wasn't set up to really make a video with him. I was set up to make a video with you, which is a different experience.
Let's go.
But we covered so much great stuff. Amazing. And I'm like, I just wish we had this to share, because I think a lot of people are playing with these ideas, thinking around similar stuff. And I think the more that we can get these words out for people to sort of think about, engage with, discuss, I think the better for the whole ecosystem. Hopefully we can help the whole thing happen faster.
I love it. And if you guys haven't checked out, Artur has the site nostr.band. It's an incredible search engine. There's some stats in there. I'm sure we'll go there in a second. But
let's do it.
Yeah,
Actually,
let's dive in.
Yeah. So you were suggesting Nostr.band. So this is Artur's project, and I visited the stats page already. He's got like a bunch of different, he's got like an RSS thing and a people discovery thing. There's all kinds of features, a search engine. But this is, I thought, would be a fun one to kind of overview a little bit. So you want to talk through a little bit what's going on here?
Yeah, let's do it.
So these are daily active users, and he's got pink meaning just daily pub keys, and then blue meaning high quality pub keys writing events.
Right.
And so I thought this is interesting to, observe, because it's an attempt at understanding what's going on in the network.
Exactly.
And sort of there was not much going on. If you can hover over and see the numbers.
Actually, can you make that bigger?
Yeah, let's see if we.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that a little better?
Mhm.
Okay. Let's make sure we've got that going. Yeah. So, there wasn't much going on back here.
Right.
And then
Pre-Jack.
that was kind of the pre-Jack. And then I think Jack hit on the, what was it, 17th or so?
a little earlier, but
So that helped bring some new wave of people on. And then there's, I think the pink ones I'd call relatively unreliable because, they're not associated with like a custom profile pic or something. So
it might be spammy.
could be spammy. Could be people just checking out new clients that auto-generate keys, but they're not really committed to the account.
Yeah.
So I really take the blue as where the signal is here.
Yeah.
You can see there's, several thousand daily, what they call high quality pub key writing events. So I think that's pretty cool. You can kind of get a sense of, a few thousand people writing a day is, enough.
Right.
And then I think this is like a little bump from the Snowden arrival.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right? Which is good. And so I think, when I look at this, I actually see a lot of optimism. You could look at it and be pessimistic, like, oh, it looks kind of flat.
Yeah.
Or you'd be like, oh, isn't it kind of dying?
Mm.
But when I look at it, I actually see a lot of optimism because I think with a new service like this, what we really need to do is just exist long enough and be a fun place, even for just a few small, few thousand people keep showing up day after day.
Yeah.
Then these exogenous events, Jack shows up, Snowden shows up. I think Adam Curry was saying Joe Rogan would be into this.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
let's go.
Get Joe Rogan on here playing. So just little by little, as long as it continues to exist and have a pulse,
Yeah.
I think that's almost all that matters.
I agree with you. And actually, if you want to go back to there,
Yeah.
let's look at the chart. Oh, I like that one even more. If you scroll down, so that's like daily actives that are writing, but then you go to daily new users, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, if you want to go even down further there, I mean, obviously you see some spike. There was definitely some and the Jack wave, and then the Snowden, but also that was like the spamming day. I think there's a lot of dick pics people saw.
Yeah.
Because this is the internet. And but if you look, I mean, we are getting a lot of new. If you look at actually, if you even go one more down to his last chart. Is that the last one? Yeah. You'll see
one more after this even.
There's one, I think this is it, that shows, go back to this one. Yeah. So like you'll see the number of, the blue line, I believe, is the number of pub keys with a profile and bio. So that's probably like a good rough estimate of users that are real and not, spammy or bots. And that continues to grow very solidly, right? Like it took about a month to go from 1,000 to 100,000. We're a couple of weeks into the next month, and we're already at 100 and 60,000, something like that.
Yeah, looks like 169,000. Yeah.
Oh, 169, of course, of course. And to me, that's a very positive sign as well because most people are not. I mean, like, look, the internet, right? There's always the 1% rule. You've got 1% of people are kind of writing, everyone else is lurking.
Yep.
It's probably less than 1% right now because it's such like a lot of the really hardcore users. A lot of the other people are still trying to get their bearings, understand. Yep. But the thing that makes me most bullish is all of this growth that we're seeing, right? The people that are hooked are really hooked. They're like addicted.
Yeah.
And then you see all these new users coming and watching, which is great. But the reality of the situation is you still need to be pretty technically savvy to participate.
Yeah.
Right? Like Damus is the only like what I would call like grandma friendly app right now.
Yep.
And it's blocked in test flights still for the App Store. We'll talk more about that. Meanwhile, you're starting to see some Android clients get better, but none are, I don't think at the level of Damus yet. Maybe they'll be there by next month. And then the web clients, there's some solid ones, but again, like they're not quite grandma ready. I'll give you an example.
You're telling me your grandma's not very cypherpunk.
My dad actually is pretty excited about it. He's able to. But, I was talking with someone who's pretty sophisticated and they were still having some trouble getting on, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that we're seeing this much engagement, we're seeing really sticky users that love it, and we don't have an app yet that normal people can use is super bullish. Yeah. The moment Damus gets out of test flight or we get something like a very good responsive web app, I think that's when you're going to see the next huge spike, is my guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand looking for like a really simple experience, and there's enough kind of new stuff to understand with public-private keys that, maybe a grandma type wouldn't necessarily, want to deal with or really be savvy to deal with right now. Back in the day, email was awkward. Now email's easy, but it felt really weird and niche back then, 20, 30, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot to be excited about. Even though the absolute numbers may not be explosive, I think just the fact that we continue to exist, we continue to have fun with it. There's new stuff happening every day. Is, I think, quite a bullish signal, despite not having great clients, or kind of clients being restricted. There's the best client out there, I'd say right now that I've used is Damus, and I think it's highly restricted. So holding back the flow of inbound interest.
The other thing that I would say is like, think about what portion. So if anyone has any questions about the health of the network, I mean, you gave me this advice. I think it's the best advice. Just play with it, right? Like the amount of really high quality signal, the amount of interesting ideas that are being shared, that's all great. But the bigger thing to me is of those, couple thousand people that are participating daily, what percentage of them are builders? Very high.
Yep.
And so, it kind of reminds me, like in this first wave, it's a little bit like, the band, like the Velvet Underground. They never went, super mainstream. And maybe this, first wave of apps won't, I don't know. But all of their listeners or fans went on to form bands, right?
Yep.
So everyone that's there right now is shipping like crazy.
Yep.
Right. If you have any questions about the health of the network, just look at all of the new clients that are being developed, all of the new experiments, which we'll talk about today. So let's say, some 50% of those users are technical and shipping, or whatever it is, 30%. That to me is the key, because they're going to plant each of them, 10 to 100x more users with their new apps.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So, yeah,
and
I'm very bullish.
There's a lot of experimentation that is enabled when you have kind of that white hot core of like your consumer is your creator, is your builder. You have a confluence of energy, great energy, helping this thing kind of exist. And so actually, it reminds me a little bit, one of your comments about kind of all of these clients and high quality clients reminds me a little bit of this discussion I had with Artur a little bit earlier today, which I wish we had a video of. It was so fun. It would have been fun to share out. But one of the things that we were talking about is how the discovery of who to follow is still pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so I was suggesting, I would love to see, we were talking about sort of the search opportunity broadly, how there's, tons of notes that might be interesting to be searchable, and there's not really a good way to do that. And so Nostr Band addresses that to some extent. But I think actually finding the people that I would want to connect with here is still not that easy.
Yeah.
And he was sort of relating the kind of early web Yahoo approach of manual curation of websites,
Directory,
right? Like, just the manual directory was a good way to organize the web until it got too big, and then you needed to have algorithmic, search, which is kind of where Google came in. And I wonder if we're really at an early stage of Nostr where, search is interesting, but it may be, it may be that we don't have enough coverage of content yet to be like, go directly after serving that use case. But discovery is one that I think I was suggesting like every client should have something like a, people you may know or suggested user list when you onboard, because so many people are going to come to like Snort Social, or Damus or anything, and be like, well, if you happen to run into the right people, if you happen to say hello, and then you get a hug back from Jack, like that's a
sweet.
good first experience. But like if you don't decide to say hello, it's easy to churn out. Or if you don't get connected to 10 or 20 other people that might be interesting voices that are active, you're going to churn out, right? Like,
Well, so I've seen two interesting approaches so far. I'm curious and what Artur and you guys talked about. One is Nostr Directory. I mean, they've got a pretty good list going right now. And I chatted with this guy. I think he's pretty sharp. Basically, that's the directory where people will tweet out their pub key.
Right.
They'll tweet their Nostr account, and then on Nostr they'll verify their Twitter account. And now he's LinkedIn, I think GitHub, and a few other things. So that's pretty reliable if you know who you're looking for. And they kind of have like a top 10 list that's got Jack and JB55, people like that. And then the other one is, I think it was Snort Social. I think it was Snort that came out with like an import your Twitter list and like find their IDs. And I'm assuming they're using Nostr Directory in the back, or I don't know, maybe they have their own list. But I think that's pretty smart as well. Just, import all of your Twitter people.
Yep.
One of the challenges there, of course, which we discussed about last week, you guys may remember I got pwned. So I had to switch keys, is, making sure you get the right key.
Yeah.
And like on Nostr Directory, it'll say, okay, like it'll show when I search for me on my Twitter account, it'll show both of my keys.
Yep.
And it does show the most updated one now, but that's still kind of confusing.
Right.
So there's a long way to go there, but those are the two best approaches I've seen so far.
Yeah. I mean, I wish like if Nostr Directory is serving it well, I wish it were just like a default page that you hit so that you can come in, regardless of what client you're using, you come in and you have a bunch of good connections, right? Like, you know, certainly connect to JB55, connect to Jack, connect to, I don't know, Camary is really active and, you know,
NVK is on there all the time.
Yeah, NVK is on there. So get connected to these people because they're generating a lot of content. That's sort of, they're creating the spots where the activity is. And so you can come on and you're not going to, you're going to be very likely to churn out if you're not connected to anything interesting. You're just like, you get a random hug, you know, and then you're like, okay, what next?
Then what now? Yeah, exactly.
But if you're like, oh, I get it. Okay, NVK, he's, you know, constantly on there talking about all kinds of interesting stuff. So
a couple interesting things to me, you know, obviously a lot of the early conversation is focused on two things: Bitcoin, because a lot of us are Bitcoiners, and Nostr itself,
right.
Which I think is great because, again, to this point, the early users are the builders. They're going to go out and start their own bands, their own projects, whatever. But I think that I'm starting to see two interesting new trends emerge. One is just like random like life hacks and stuff. For example, I think it was Jack that was sharing like his like, you know, I guess like a paper about not drinking coffee, which we can talk about later. But it was like, it actually made me think, it's like, this is pretty interesting. Or, you know, seeing people sort of talk about the virtues of sauning and cold plunging, which I'm really into.
Right.
So I think there's like some life hacky stuff, which a lot more people will be curious about. And then the other big trend I'm seeing is that just this week after Snowden kind of, I mean, not that they're on the same level as Snowden, but two of the bigger accounts to join were Lynn Alden and Willy Woo. And both of them are, you know, Lynn's obviously known as more of a macro thinker and Willy Woo is more of a crypto, you know, kind of price guy. And I think that's big because now some of their content, at least Willie, started to publish some of his Twitter type stuff on there,
right.
Which is interesting because now if I'm a new user, I'm coming in, it's not just Bitcoin and Nostr, but I'm saying, okay, like I was interested in following his price action stuff on Twitter.
Right.
Now it's here as well. So you're already starting to see the expansion into like adjacent but new areas.
Right. So I want the clients to help a new user figure out that Willie's there because
and you know, you may want meta tags, right, of like content like, hey, I'm interested in macro and finance. Find me Lynn and, you know, Preston and these kind of people. I'm interested in like life hacks, like Jack and whoever, I don't know, like is sharing that stuff.
Talking about cold plunges, it's gonna become a very traditional podcast all of a sudden.
Yeah. Hey man, I like every day, just like a quick shout I want to give.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to live close enough to, you know, San Francisco Bay. And for me, the greatest thing all day is getting to jump in that super cold water. Ideally, if I have time, get a workout, hit the sauna as well. Not every day I have time, but that combo is like pura vida.
Right. And so are you also subscribing to this no caffeine thing or this kind of caffeine free life?
Well, so I want to talk to you about that. So I'm not a big coffee drinker. You know, occasionally I'll have one in the morning. What I'm really addicted to though is green tea. I'm like super into Japanese tea, potentially, you know, particularly senchas, gyokros. I love, like, to me, it's kind of like a morning ritual.
Yeah.
The kind of middle ground I've landed on is I don't do too much coffee and maybe I'll just get totally off of it again. I've gone years without it because it makes me very jittery. With the green tea, I found that it doesn't make me as jittery. There's also that L-theanine or this other compound, which is supposed to be kind of help with like calm focus. What I do though is I don't have any caffeine at all afternoon.
Right.
Because the half-life of caffeine, the quarter life is I think 12 and 6 hours respectively.
Yeah.
So if I drink afternoon, I have trouble going to sleep. But if I cut off, even like ideally a little bit before, like I had my last, like coming over to your house, I had my last delicious sip of the day.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, what about you? Do you do coffee or?
I do every day.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying I never would give it up, but like I would need some pretty compelling evidence.
Yeah. Not just like a random blog post.
You know, I actually skimmed through it. I'm curious to learn more about it, but I'm not ready yet.
You know where I'm coming down on all of this stuff, diet, caffeine, everything, is I think every body is different.
Yeah.
You know, I think someone was sharing with me, I forgot where it was, some podcast or whatever, but I think everyone just has a different composition and maybe what works for you doesn't work for me. And I think the only answer to any of this stuff is you just have to try it.
Yep. Yep.
Try new diets, try with caffeine, without caffeine.
Try new social media architectures.
Yeah. Try new financial systems.
Okay, so we're getting a little off track. Let's rein it in here. We're not giving lifestyle tips.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Wait till next week's pod.
So okay, so many things happened this, even just since last Wednesdays. We've been keeping
crazy.
notes. We got way too many notes here of things that are
course.
interesting. One thing that I actually let's start with the App Store rejection.
Yeah, it's big.
'Cause that was kind of a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it was it a day ago?
Yeah,
I've
a
got
day or
Will
two
here
ago.
talking about how the app was submitted. It's been in test flight. I think it's hit the 10,000 test flight limit cap, and so it's been submitted to the App Store. And I think App Store policy is, I would describe it as just not structured to really understand this. I think it's a pretty new. It's a new architecture for information on the internet. It doesn't fit neatly into like this is an app that controls its database.
Yeah.
So I think it's much more a social browser in a sense.
Yeah.
But it means that the people who are required to review an app before it goes live in the App Store have a kind of a checklist of things they're trying to get through.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily make sense given this new architecture.
Yeah.
So do you have sort of any experience submitting apps, or have you sort of read through the points of contention here?
Yeah, I mean, not personally. My understanding is that there's kind of two main areas. One is the ability to delete users if they're, violating terms of service and being abusive or whatever, which is sort of possible, but sort of not. Obviously, you can if you have a specific relay, I suppose you could potentially stop them from submitting to that relay or block them in some way. You can't really delete what they're saying. That's the whole point. Because they can just post other relays. You can potentially eject them from the app, which I guess also is like a temporary measure. The other thing is around payments, right? Because obviously there's a lot of payments happening in this app. I don't think they have any kind of custodial wallet though, and no plans for it. So right now, if I wanted to do a tip, they have a nice wallet selector, so I can use my Breeze or Moon or Cash App or whatever, which is nice. But again, that's a very new kind of concept.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the bigger question for me right now is I've been thinking about this even pre-Nostr.
Mm-hmm.
If someone asked me, what is like the biggest threat to Bitcoin Lightning going, like what's the biggest thing that could prevent it from going mainstream really fast? Let's say in the next 2 years. Because I think that's kind of inevitable. I think the answer would be if Google and Apple come together and just block all the Lightning apps in the App Store. It's obviously not going to kill it. You can still use web apps or whatever.
Right.
But that's a pretty big choke point. And so one of the questions that I have is this going to be like a smooth transition where Apple just says, yeah, no worries. It's a new paradigm. You're good. Is it going to be a temporary, we're letting you in, and then wait a second, what do we just do? And then they kind of go back on their word. Or is this going to be, they take a hardline stance. They don't let any of these apps in, or at least, any of the Nostr apps, and then maybe they go back and Lightning apps. We'll see. And this is kind of a push for us to get out of the App Store, whether that's with responsive web apps, a new third-party phone coming out, which is a little bit wilder. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think right now it's probably early for a lot of this stuff to really be well understood.
Yeah.
Across both the Nostr ecosystem, but as well kind of big tech. Mm-hmm. I don't think big tech is as plotting about trying to keep this down as I think some of the chatter would describe it.
Fewer conspiracies.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of concerns that Apple's trying to hold this down. I think Apple has a check. There's some low-level reviewer who's responsible for doing this. They're not making strategic decisions about the company or the App Store or the 30% tax. They're just trying to execute their job. And the checklist doesn't match what they expect or what the checklist is designed to expect. And so they kind of, they say, well, I don't know, what's going on here? You got to be able to delete a user. You got to be able to moderate content. We've never heard of anything that would relieve you of that responsibility. So the checklist says do it. So I think it's much less nefarious or conspiracy oriented than maybe some of the more loud, more vocal voices would suggest. But I do think the payments thing in particular is going to, is probably the thing that creates most of the challenge in the ecosystem, which is today, if whether it's custodial or non-custodial, you're not actually buying stuff from people in the app.
Right.
And I'd say that is kind of I would call it the line drawn by Apple.
Yeah.
Which is if you're buying a digital item to consume in the app experience, you have to pay the 30% tax. Mm-hmm. If you're dispatching an Uber, that you consume outside of the app experience, you don't have to pay the 30% tax. So Uber doesn't pay 30% of Uber revenue to Apple.
That's a good point.
Candy Crush does pay 30% of all whatever candy, gold pellets, whatever they buy.
Yeah. ERC 20s.
So I think the idea that you don't actually buy anything in these apps gives a lot of air cover.
Yeah.
Relative to like if you were actually selling digital goods on Damus, right? That's not the case. But I do think, Apple is in a tough position from a kind of regulatory perspective. Given I'm sure you followed a little bit the Epic Games.
Yeah, of course.
I think is it Ben Thompson? I think has been calling for he's sort of called many years ago like this App Store kind of. This fee structure is probably not going to be sustainable long term, but they'll keep it going as long as it can. So I think that's like a pretty reasonable assessment of what's going on. Is like they don't really know how to evaluate it. They don't. Are you hearing?
Yeah, I was like, do you hear music?
That's a vacuum.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Cleaning downstairs. Yeah.
I'm like, I think I hear a band starting to play.
They're going to beatbox for us.
Yeah, maybe.
So yeah, I think it's really nice in Nostr. There's nothing being bought. It's just tips and it's money flowing around. So it's closer to a payments app like a Zelle or a PayPal or I think it works because of that. But there's just like some hurdles to get over to explain what it is. And then long term, does this kind of thing? I don't know. Like, what's the state of progressive web apps?
I have no idea.
Because like most of the reason you want an app is because it's somewhat easier mental model that people understand. But some of the thing is like push notifs, which aren't part of Damus or any other app right now, right? Because they have some centralization aspects to them. So I think the fact that push notifs are not even part of the thing means that a progressive web app has a reasonable chance of being a likely replacement if the experience, the UX of navigating threads and stuff can be built well enough. And I haven't played with it in recent months, but I suspect that it's getting much better. It just seems to be constant progress towards that. So yeah, I'm kind of optimistic that even if the Apple Google thing got to a really high level strategic decision about wanting to limit the use of these, that it still probably would be fine. That, that a progressive web app version of these types of things would be, probably not easy to really limit, and there's not a lot of in-app purchases. It's more tipping going on.
Have you seen anyone working on a progressive web app? And if anyone's out there listening, if you've seen one, you want to share it with us, I'd be really curious to know.
I've not seen anyone doing that yet, but I'm excited to see that because it does seem like something that should be possible. And I haven't tried using I've played around with Snort Social on the web, and it's a pretty good web experience. It doesn't feel very native appy. It feels more webby.
Yeah.
But if you have a really good web app, I think my guess is you could do some customization at the interface layer, CSS, HTML, JavaScript to make it much more app-like.
Totally. And to be honest, right now I'm using Damus almost exclusively because I'm particularly paranoid after getting my keys stolen. Right. But in the pre-Damus world, I never had the Twitter app, or I haven't had it in many, many, many years. And the reason is, if anything, look, it's funny to me because I'm so excited about Nostr, and I'm excited about obviously the next waves we'll talk about after just Twitter and social media. Yeah. But the reality is, even though I love Nostr, honestly, I've been going through a journey over the last 5 or 6 years where I'm trying to get more off of social media in general, just because I find being able to focus in the moment, not check my phone, when I'm waiting in line bored. And I think one of my own personal hacks for that, I know I'm not the average user, but one of my own personal hacks is I never had the app. Instead, I would literally, every time I have to go to twitter.com on my phone, sign in, never leave it signed in. A
little bit of extra friction.
It's a pain in the ass. Yeah. And I'm not saying I never did it, but you can't just I'm bored, whip it out, and then play, right? That sounds great. You can't just play, scroll for fun. So personally, I would love just to have a responsive web app and just, call for proposals or call for projects. If anyone's working on that, please tag us and let us know.
Love to hear about it. Yep. Cool. So that's App Store rejection. I suspect, both whether it's client side things to limit, block accounts, delete accounts, content moderation type stuff. It's not really going to be it's not going to be in the architecture that Apple expects, but it's probably one that would satisfy their existing policy and requirements. So my guess is we'll get this through in the next, I don't know, I hope
couple weeks.
Yeah, would hopefully.
Yeah, and look, and shout out JB55. I know this must be a pain in the ass
yeah.
for him, but like it seems like he's taking all the right steps,
Yep.
like putting in the blocking and all that. So,
Yep.
it's good to see. But
Yep. Awesome. Okay, we've got a few questions that we've been talking about here that we wanted to address.
Okay.
So number one is kind of this question of where do algorithms live? So we've started to see the kind of arrival of algorithms, let's call it.
Yeah.
And I think Jack tweeted or noted. Is it called a note? Is that what we call it when you
Nostred?
write?
I don't know. Noted.
Noted on Nostr.
Yeah.
Noted. Kind of here come the algorithms or something.
Yeah.
And I think it was meant to sort of recognize that the algorithms that are being built today are probably done mostly with good intentions.
Yeah.
And I think he was relating that back, early algorithms at Twitter were also kind of done with good intentions. It wasn't necessarily somebody trying to like create, divisiveness, but just that, when you have abstractly these sets of systems work in a certain way, at the early days, they might just be in service of us and the goals of the creators and the people who want to use them. But when they get optimized to an extreme is when they kind of fall apart for kind of the original purpose.
Yeah.
So I think the idea that algorithms are going to arrive and that they are arriving, I'd say it's probably a good thing. But I think the structure of like who develops it, how do they get plugged into clients,
Right.
where do they live within the kind of client relay middleware or other kind of ecosystem is important. And then also how transparent, replaceable, and pluggable are they?
I think that's the key to me. And just for context, for anyone that didn't see this, I think it was Nostagram. I forget that's the exact name, but basically the developer of that app was doing kind of what you were suggesting earlier, which is, you want to make sure people are getting decent content that's interesting in their first day using the app, right? Because otherwise they're not going to come back. And so his basic idea was, okay, we're just going to show you some notes that are based on the people you follow, what they like or what they, shaka, soon hopefully what they zap, that. And honestly, that's very reasonable. Like it sounds like, the people I follow, I am curious what they're liking and shaka. And Jack's point back to that was to what you were saying. That's the way we started at Twitter, all both good intentions and truly useful. But obviously grows a life of its own. To me, the most important thing here is what you said, which is the end user transparency. Whether it's the client that does it or the client that hooks into an algorithm, the dream state for me is that whatever clients become very big, the user has the ability to say, turn off the algorithm. It's either raw feed or, ideally an app store for algorithms.
Yeah.
Right? Like here are all the different algorithms you can use, mix and match, play, write your own, whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I almost think that the algorithms should be pluggable. Almost the App Store concept is a nice analogy because you want to be able to plug them in and rip them out when they're not serving you.
Exactly.
Right? So like, having the ability to exit a system, make sure that the players behave more in service of you so that you don't exit.
Right.
Instead of, the typical monopoly that we have on the internet means like it doesn't matter if you don't like it, there's not really number two, so good luck.
Yeah.
But I think that, putting all of technology in a state of hyper competition with each other, with itself, is generally going to, keep everybody behaving well and kind of limit, some of the kind of more nefarious extreme outcomes that we have in the world today.
I agree. So the big question that I have for you, and the big question for anyone listening to this, if you have comments, please let us know, is where is the algorithm going to live? So we've talked about a couple of different options. This guy, Nostagram, I believe, I think he's writing the algorithm himself in the client. We've talked about before in the future, relays are pretty dumb today. Now there's paid relays. We'll talk about that. And maybe they could also be the ones to suggest their own. Additionally, you could have this middleware layer, which is like, if we had the App Store, there's a whole bunch of different algos that you could choose.
Right.
I still don't have a super strong opinion yet, has your thinking developed on where you think the algos are going to live?
Yeah, I was talking with Jonathan. Did we talk about Jonathan Geller before? I know we have
No.
his post.
Oh,
I was talking with Jonathan about this the other day. We took a walk after dinner, and he was a product guy at Facebook and managed, I don't know, billion user products and stuff.
I think I've heard of them before.
And he, I was sort of, he's a Bitcoiner and loves the ethos of this stuff. But he's like, what's this Nostr thing, So I started, sharing my excitement and what it's all about. And I think we're sort of together trying to wrestle with like, what are these pieces and where do they live? So he was proposing something of a middleware layer that, today we think about clients, we think about relays. And maybe if we just call it middleware, and maybe it actually is closer attached to clients, or maybe it's closer attached to relays, or maybe it is its own ecosystem. I don't know. But there's some sort of like middleware that needs to say, here are the people that a client should show. And that may be that it's a service of the relay, or it might be it's a service of the client. But it seems like it's an area where you could build something, that helps clients get connected, helps new users of a given client to connect to more people to keep them more retained.
Right.
So it's hard to have a good experience. You're not connected to people. So that could live there. But I think it has to have a lot of knowledge about who is on the network, who is active, and what's being written.
Yeah.
And those are like the core functions of a relay. So it's not that it has to be a relay, but a relay probably has the best view into what it should be. Mm-hmm. And so that middleware thing feels to me like it's, it needs to be very closely adjacent to a relay. Not that it's the same software or the same protocol, but just that it's, maybe whoever operates a good relay that has lots of notes from lots of people and knows what other people might like each other's notes, kind of all that information hub, that middleware thing may operate within the same org that runs that relay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know if you've seen this. I think we mentioned it before. This guy, Masiak, who's working on Hive.1, and they're basically trying to do algorithms. I think he's very bullish on Nostr, but today is kind of focused on Twitter. And I think one thing that's interesting that they do is they kind of automatically show clusters for you, right? So if you're like, okay, I'm interested in Bitcoin Twitter, it'll just show you like, here are all the people in Bitcoin Twitter and kind of rank them. And you can do that now for different, I don't know, health and wellness or like whatever topics you want. I think one key thing for these algorithms is going to be the ability to kind of surface keywords and tag. And maybe first it'll be like kind of Yahoo directory like you were talking about. I think Artur was mentioning trying to working on a NIP to have keywords, in there, which is
NIP 50.
NIP 50.
Yeah.
All right, you're on it, baby.
We were talking about it this morning. Yeah, NIP 50.
What was he saying? Yeah.
So he was discussing it with Fiat Joff, and Fiat Joff. I guess the process for NIPs, and in case I think we haven't probably talked that much about it.
No, please. Sure.
But my understanding from Artur is that the kind of the gold standard for getting a NIP in is
the what standard?
The Bitcoin standard. For getting a NIP in would be to have it implemented in 2 clients and 1 relay. And I think there's a few cases where that wasn't done. That kind of Fiat Joff just made the decision by Fiat. But sorry,
that's good.
But I think in this case he had, does he have maybe Iris.2 and Snort Social? He has an implementation, I think live or a PR raised in each of those, so that they would be live soon. And I think that plus like 1 relay operating it was enough that they now have like a BIP 50, which is a kind of a fairly simple like keyword filtering BIP.
Just as
NIP.
quick sidebar on that, it seems like a pretty low bar for a NIP to get in. Just 2 clients and 1 relay, because there's gonna be so many clients in. Is that?
Well, I think it doesn't mean that everybody who achieves that is going to get a BIP in and approved, but it's like, is it worthy of discussion? Well, it must at least achieve that bar.
Got it. Okay.
I think there's like a few exceptions, but basically it needs to achieve that bar to even be like
worthy
if you haven't done that work, it's not worth discussion.
Yeah, don't even talk.
If you've done that work and there's something interesting, then you probably know enough about like, what are the features of the client that are tough? What are the features that cause it to be centralizing in a way that might be uncomfortable for future clients? And like, you start to like, just by having a working implementation, you have like a much better sense of where the edges lie. And so you have a better sense of how to how to have a meaningful discussion around should this be part of the protocol or not.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So we were BIP 50 keywords. We're talking middleware.
Yep. Algorithms.
Algorithms. Yeah. So I think that some algorithms would be good to get into clients early, and whether that's by the client developers themselves, or if it's by relay operators, or just, free agent developers who are doing things in between and they're not sure, are they going to work on a client, are they going to work on a relay, are they going to work on something else? But I think having something that helps all clients just be like, oh, sure, merge it in, and then we have a suggested user list, which helps new users who come on find interesting content faster.
Yeah.
That seems like it'd be like a net good for the system. And the important point that we were addressing is you need to have exit, so transparency of what the algorithm does, and then exit. Like if I don't like that algorithm, I can swap it in with one that I do like.
Or just turn it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and a call to any of the developers out there. I mean, I know the people that are working in the ecosystem at this point are obviously the vast majority of them are very mission driven and mission aligned around this openness. But I think, Jack's made this point a lot with JB55 and some other people. Like the decisions that we make today may end up snowballing and ricocheting way past what we decide. So I think anything developers can do to just kind of set that norm in their clients or the relays, whoever's doing this, that algorithms can be easily surfaced to users and easily either switched out or turned off, I think is a great service to the future of this whole network.
Yep. Cool. And the other one on the where do algorithms live that came from Jonathan, he was sort of, everything he was framing as this billion user app. So he was seeing if Damus is so well built, won't that be the one that reaches a billion users? And I think, for somebody coming from the Facebook world, that seems
old world.
And I mean, he's a very innovative thinker,
sure, but
he's also rooted outside. He hasn't spent the time thinking about this and meeting people and discussing it as much as we have. So he's kind of got I think there's a mental model shift that you need to digest. And even if you understand it technically, you still need to internalize it
and play with it. Yeah.
And play with it. But he was sort of suggesting maybe there's this, this billion user app. And I'm not sure that it's going to get to be that big, but I think there's a possibility that it does. And so one idea is let's say you've got a great substrate like Damus, but you want to launch, that left-handed feature just showed up, or you want to launch some other view into the stuff that basically uses everything from Damus but customizes it in a certain way. So I wonder if the future of something like a Damus might just be one app with a specific implementation, but I wonder if a Damus app could enable you to sort of load your own flavor of the Damus app, almost like a configuration file that says okay, add the left-hand feature. I don't really need the the Arabic language feature is not one that I'm going to use. So I don't even bother downloading that module or incorporating that configuration code. But maybe I want dark mode. So all the UI components required for that, I want to pull those all in and kind of use a configuration to make Damus really what you want it to be instead of what necessarily JB55 started with.
Right.
So does it almost become a framework for configuring your own app, or will it just be dozens, hundreds, thousands of apps?
Well, this brings up two very interesting and important questions, and we can talk about both of these things.
Yep.
One is the idea of taking a popular app and just forking it, which obviously there's some interesting conversation around that this week. And then the second conversation topic is the idea of micro apps that are not Damus itself, but just hey, one app for marketplace, one app for whatever. Maybe the first thing, I don't know how much time I'm going to spend on this. Generally, I don't like bullying people, whatever. But there was one of these Stacks guys that came on board, and to be clear, it's not an ecosystem. Look, Bitcoin only, it is what it is. But everyone's entitled to their views, whatever. Right. And he came along and basically forked Damus. And it was pretty cringe. Basically used the exact same logo, and just called it Damus Plus. It was almost like, is this a joke?
Yeah.
But it wasn't a joke. And anyways, long story short, obviously I think he did that in a very poorly received way and with good reason. But it does make me wonder in the future, is there a way, to your point, where one interesting thing you can do now with value for value payments, right, is you can kind of like for any payment that comes in, like if you're on the Fountain app and you're listening to a podcast, if I stream sats to a podcast, I can basically say, well, like, hey, if I send 1 Bitcoin, maybe 10% of that goes to podcastindex.org, maybe 10% goes to Fountain the app, maybe 10% goes to the producer of the podcast, 10% to the guest. Like basically you can just split all those payments in real time. Yep. I think that's pretty cool. Maybe there's going to be a way like that you can do this in a more tasteful way where, if you do want custom versions of the app, you can still both give attribution and credit or, potential payments flows to the original thinkers and authors on those. I don't know exactly how that's going to go, but that's an interesting question is how can you, encourage innovation in a way that's productive and gives credit to the author.
Yeah.
So that's one question. And then the second question, which is I've been thinking a lot about, and I want to get your thoughts on are, what comes after this whole Twitter wave? Because the Twitter thing is cool and Damus is awesome and Snore is awesome and Iris and Astral. But like, I'm pretty convinced that while Twitter is going to be big, this is not the killer app. The killer app is something in the next wave that no one knows. And my guess is it's going to be a whole different set of clients and apps.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think I wrote this piece, I think I published last week, which was like, is Nostr just for building Twitter clients? And, even in the subtitle, I just said, nope, because I don't think it's only that. But I do think that a Twitter-like experience is a great first app. And I think there's a long way to run with that core experience because we've never had a Twitter-like experience that could run in thousands of different directions. We have like the Twitter experience that runs in like a single direction. And for years, it was kind of a slowly evolving direction. So I think more innovation around that core is already going to be super interesting.
Yeah.
And it's not to say there's not any negativity on other stuff, but I think one of the important things for a new service like this is to be able to have a bit of like a water cooler party feel to it. And I think Twitter is kind of a global town square, global water cooler in a sense. And I think anything that's not that is going to be, I think, a little bit later. Not that it couldn't be experimented with now. I think there's lots of good experimentation going on. And one of the ones I mentioned is like Wallet Scrutiny is a website that's incorporating Nostr identities to do their commenting system. And they have a nice video I shared in the link on the blog post I wrote about that. So that's curiousdk.com. I can share the link in the...
It's a really good post.
But I think that the way that is structured right now, I guess the way it's structured right now, it's, I think, more experimental than like takeoff. And look at like even looking at the Nostr.band stats that we were looking at, it takes a village, right, to be active and to be consistent and show up every day and talk to each other and have a party.
Yeah.
And I think if you start splitting off and doing things that diffuse the party early, I think they're wonderful experiments and prototypes. I wouldn't suggest we don't put energy towards that. I think it's like collectively good to experiment with those. But I think we kind of need a well-functioning, humming party.
Yeah, first.
And then I think the other stuff almost like spills over, comes out of all of that good work.
I agree. And yeah, to be clear, I think we still have millions of users to go on the Twitter. And I think Twitter itself is going to be a huge one. Like even if it's just Twitter plus Lightning payments, and with the new search and discovery that comes with it, that's already a huge move forward. But I am just curious, and I want to give a shout out to who is this @StarBuilder who gave us this question. Assuming that we continue to grow that hot core of kind of water cooler, social media discussion, Twitter-like discussion, and we're going to get new topics beyond just Bitcoin Nostr. He was asking basically, what is the next micro app economy that's going to grow out?
Right.
I'll just posit one of the ones I think could be really huge first. I'm just curious, even if this is 6 months or a year out, what you think is going to pop off next. To me, two areas that I'm really excited about are all kinds of marketplaces. We talked about this a little bit last time. I think the local Bitcoins, I don't think it's going to be the biggest, but I think maybe is going to be the first because there's a lot of Bitcoin users on there. A lot of people understand the concept of local Bitcoins. I think a lot of people would see the value in doing it over Nostr instead of a centralized service. I think Grunch already put one of those out. Maybe some other people will launch soon, but that's one that I'm looking at, and I'm curious what other marketplace will take off. The other, and maybe this will come in the Twitter use case, but it's just like basically bounty boards, job boards. And I know that's going to be another big topic for us, but I think bounties and kind of hiring people is going to be huge as well.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think I may have said this before, but I think the more that it's a purely digital use case, the earlier I think it's gonna be to work in this environment. So I think, kind of publishing, messaging, communications are like purely digital. The publisher and the receiver are kind of, publisher and reader are consuming digitally and participating digitally. The stuff like, is it Mostro? Is that, there's like a,
oh yeah, that's the Grunch thing.
it's
Mostro,
like a,
Mostro.
yeah, and we'll share a link to that. But that, that's a, an example of an exchange, a Bitcoin exchange that happens, I think, on Nostr. And so that kind of thing is purely digital. I think that's going to work. That kind of stuff seems credible to work, and especially because you don't have centralized order book to deal with. You can actually just, investigate what you believe the Bitcoin price is from other parties. You don't need to rely on that marketplace to do the matching or kind of the pricing. So that actually, that kind of stuff looks really promising to me. And then, the job boards, not like come over and, I want to dispatch a ride to the airport or something that, the Uber-like use case I think is much more challenging, but I want to have some new clip art for, I want somebody to design a logo for my YouTube page. I think that's a great example. Purely digital, transactions. I think those kinds of things will work well kind of early.
On that note, should we talk about bounties?
Yeah,
Stacker
yeah,
News?
let's do it. Yeah.
Cool. So one of the other topics we want to talk about this week, and Stacker News obviously today is a centralized site, but we've had Keon on before. We know he's thinking about Nostr. He's really familiar with it, and maybe it will be tied in the future. But Keon launched what I think is the coolest feature. I mean, by the way, shout out to Keon. That man ships every week.
Respect.
There's something dope
Totally.
every week.
Totally.
He had open timestamps last week.
Yep.
I mean, just the man is on fire. And so this week he released, or last week I guess now, bounties. And the concept of a bounty in this first iteration, it's quite simple, but if you haven't been to stacker.news, it's like Reddit, but you can upvote with sats, right? And so this is a new post type. They have polls, they have normal posts, but on this post type, you basically pose a question or a service that you'd like rendered, and you say, I'm going to pay X amount of Satoshis.
Yep.
And then today it's completely within the discretion of the poster, the original poster, to actually follow through on that. Maybe in the future they'll experiment with some kind of escrow service that's not there yet. I think that could be a good idea. But we've already seen 2 bounties on Stacker News. Keon saying like, I'll give 10,000 sats to whoever gives the best comment on my meta post about bounties.
Right.
And then someone came back the next day and posted essentially, what is your best argument for how Bitcoin could die? Like Steel Man. If you had to really say Bitcoin died, like obviously we're all very bullish, but it's always intellectually healthy to take the opposite side, right?
Yep.
And so I thought that was super cool, and he offered 10,000 sats.
Right.
So I'm really excited to see not only on Stacker News, but on Nostr as well, more people, throwing out their projects they want built, questions they want answered, information they want surfaced. I think that's going to be, honestly, if I had to take a big bet right now after Twitter, I think this is going to be the next biggest function in the network.
And do you have, I agree. I think this is interesting because it's another purely digital experience, but there's a little bit of overlay of kind of reputation, information quality. There's different kinds of graph information that this would have that maybe a Twitter-like experience wouldn't have.
Right.
So I wonder, like, bounties to me, in a sense, it's adjacent to search.
Yep.
It's relevant in many ways. I wonder, like, do you have bounties top of mind right now that you would launch? Like, what would be the first bounty that you would make?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple.
And why haven't you made it yet?
Hey, exactly. Just been like a little busy / lazy. I think there's a couple. Let's say some that are more like practical for my work, and then maybe some that are just like personal, right? Practical for work, there's 2 big areas I would love to use this for. One is I desperately need a website redesign. I've been like so busy and not focused on that. And so I want to find someone to help me make the website look super dope. And I should just post a bounty for that. And maybe I'll do that on Stacker News. And that would be super cool. I also need someone to help me design a new deck soon. So like basically some design type work that would be really useful. So that's one that's very obvious. A second kind of work related, and I would actually be curious to try this even with Stacker News or whatever, is for a lot of my portfolio companies, we're often hiring. And it's really interesting, like in the old Web 2.0 world, a lot of tech companies that are very well funded will throw out huge amounts of cash to find a good engineer. I think that, modest compared to those kind of bounties, but just open posting. If anyone finds me an engineer or designer or whatever that end up hiring, like here's the bounty.
You know what the market rate is on contingency recruiting?
What is it right now?
I think 20% of first year annualized salary is I'd say the traditional mark.
Seriously?
And I've seen it go to 35% in a hot market.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, and just so you guys know, I mean, these are engineers that are making what, like $300K or something, or maybe not that much, but
yeah,
they're doing well.
Tech, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so like imagine.
But even let's take even like a startup type of role, which maybe
100K, whatever.
Call it 100K. But if you've got $20,000 of placement fee to go around, I mean, you've got basically a Bitcoin worth of placement fee if you make the right connection.
That's I mean, imagine, like, anyone listening to this, imagine someone said, I will pay you 1 Bitcoin if you find me an excellent engineer I end up hiring in the next month. Of course people are going to do that. Yep. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be like, it'll drive the cost down. Maybe it won't be a full Bitcoin, but even if it's half of that,
yeah,
that's still crazy.
Yeah. I think the more that you get to the more that you have a system that can generate signal, quality from the noise, which is not, I think typical job like boards are really bad at that because it's just like open posting. Everybody can post. You don't know really what happens. You don't have reputations. That those things end up becoming kind of a race to the bottom,
right.
Which is why I think people pay up for contingency recruiting because it's like a much more bespoke hand curated thing. But ultimately, if the outcome is you hire the person you want, that's worth a ton to anybody trying to hire. So yeah.
So okay, so those are 2 things I would use it for professionally. I want to redesign on my website and deck, and then some kind of like specific contingency recruiting for startups. Personally, though, I'm even more excited. I just want to I don't even know yet, but I want to just play with like various kinds of information. Okay, I'll give you an example. I have a bit of an addiction to books. Like, if anything, my name is Max, and I have a book problem to the point where I can't walk into a bookstore or go on Amazon without buying.
Just fall in love.
Oh, I have so many books, and it's just like as much.
What are you reading?
Nonstop.
What are the topics?
Dude, everything. Like,
have you read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow?
No, what is that?
It's a one we just picked up. So I read with my wife. I read to my wife. So I read books. Oh, she listens to audiobooks.
That's nice.
Narrated by her husband.
Yeah. Good relationship advice from DK here.
But we just picked up this one, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is kind of a
Macbeth, no?
No, it's like I think it's a futuristic sci-fi. Well, it's a little bit set in the past.
Okay.
But chapter 1, at least, we finished yesterday. But it's kind of about these MIT hackers, and this girl made a video game, and this guy is kind of obsessed with her. But I don't know all where it goes, but I guess it explores some sort of probably dystopian future. But we're on that. We just finished Solito.
Oh.
Have you read that?
No.
It's Javier Zamora, who talks about his crossing from El Salvador to he actually moved up to San Rafael, was where his parents were. Yeah.
It's real. Like, this is a true story.
He's now like a writer. I think he's on the right in, I don't know. He's a writer in residence, or one of the professors at Stanford in one of the writing programs. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, no, so I
a little book detour.
But this is a great thing, right? It's like, and I know people on Nostr are going to be really into this. So I would love to just bounties on like books, book recommendations, article recommendations, basically information, right? And by the way, I think this could even go beyond just bounties. Like, I would love to see like a Goodreads on here, right? Something like that, right? Where I can have like reputation and like. But the point is, like, I love, like, the thing that I have limited time, and I have, like everyone, and I have an insatiable desire for really good, interesting information. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, Keon shared a really cool talk with us last night. I haven't watched all of it yet, but like, whenever you find someone that sends you like a truly under the radar hidden gem book or talk, man, that's valuable.
Yeah. Did you watch the David Clark?
I watched like 5 minutes of it. Hopefully I have time tonight. I'm sure it's dope.
It's so good. I didn't realize he was the one who was responsible. Do you see that quote that was shared?
Read it. It's good.
I'm gonna pull it up because you probably mostly heard this
actually
quote before.
DK, while you pull it up, my apologies, guys. As you know, I chug a lot of tea. I'm gonna make a quick bathroom run. Okay, DK, share that quote.
Can you get around
I can,
without? Okay, we don't want to take the whole system down just because Max needs a little bio break, but whoops, as everything falls apart. So this quote, I'll share. This guy, I guess I can't believe I didn't know him by name, but Kean shared with us this guy, Dave Clark, who's also known as the Internet Architect. And it's a deep dive in pursuit of insight about how systems should be built on top of Nostr. It's kind of the reason that Kian was sharing it. Dave Clark is not talking about Nostr, but he's talking about some of the early protocol decisions they made when building, things like, TCP/IP. So it touches on a lot of the topics that we might be interested in. His book is Designing an Internet, and he built it and guided standards for 50 years. So that's one we want to pick up and read. A friend was sharing his LinkedIn, which is kind of awesome. It says senior research scientist at MIT, 1966 to present. So he has quite a tenure, 57 years, 1 month. I don't think I've ever seen a LinkedIn bio that covers 57 years of work at a single place. And he was the chief protocol architect of the internet from 1981 to 1989. And as part of that, there's this quote that I'd heard the quote, but I didn't know it was from him. And he said, "We reject kings, presidents, and voting. We believe in rough consensus and running code." So I think it's a great quote. I think we all know the concept of rough consensus, but we didn't know necessarily the origin of that. So that's Dave Clark, and I'll link the YouTube video. It's really good. I watched the whole thing last night, and I was tweeting it. It's so good.
Very cypherpunk quote, and I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah.
Thanks for bearing with me, guys. My tea addiction is a thing.
Cool. So we talked algorithms.
Yep.
We talked bounties. And
sorry, one last thing I just want to put on there is on both of those, if anyone listening has their own ideas, on what the next big micro app is, how you would use bounties or where you think algorithms should live, please let us know. We're really excited to hear from everyone on that.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna. I've been messing around again. I'm like more a talker than audio, video, live stream engineer. But
this man's pretty damn good at this shit. So.
But I've been getting all the equipment, learning how to do this, and so I think I have the ability to patch in a live stream participant.
Are we gonna do it now?
Not now.
Okay, I was about to say we're going live.
We should test this sometime.
We can do it next week.
Yeah. So the reason I was mentioning it is, if you do, like you were just soliciting, if people have opinions, ideas, feedback, micro apps that they want to build or that they want feedback on, we could probably start doing that soon, but we should test it first. Yeah. But anyway, call out that if you're interested in that kind of thing, we're going to probably be doing it once we've tested it. So maybe next week we'll be ready with that.
That would be sweet.
Cool. So was there other topic-wise? We've got the micro relays question that Kamari had asked. Do you want to?
Yeah, let's tackle that. I haven't read this one yet, so I'm curious what you.
So yeah, so Kamari said, thoughts on micro relays which connect to a bunch of relays on your behalf so that your client doesn't need to do relay management. Micro relays also know your follows and interested tags, so it knows how to find optimal relays with such content.
Interesting.
So this, to me, it sounds, there's this idea that I think was floated more around the publishing side, that people should run their own relays to have a reliable source of their information is available. Yeah. That it can't, could be spread around. This is talking about micro relays. So micro relays, a personal relay could be an example of a micro relay, but this seems like a more general concept that's not necessarily connect to a bunch of relays on your behalf so your client doesn't need to do relay management. So I guess maybe this is kind of a similar instinct, but maybe a different framing of the same, which is, we talked, I think last week about Umbrel, and Umbrel has an app store. You maybe can pull down your own relay software, and you could point your relay at your Umbrel, and then from there you could branch out to the 8 relays you want to connect to or more. Right. So I think that kind of thing seems like there's something in the water that idea is coming up again and again. What are the trade-offs? I guess like for a new user who's just getting into this, they probably don't run Umbrel. They probably don't have a relay. They don't really want to think about it. Like I think part of the problem with a lot of these, services in the past have either been like so centralized, they're super easy, but they're kind of, have these annoying side effects around content moderation and lack of control and discovery and all kinds of problems. But then the opposite is like purely P2P,
Right.
which is like architecturally challenging if you're like not on, if the clients are not available at all times, that doesn't work really well. And so I think what's beautiful about Nostr is it kind of manages a middle ground where you don't have to rely on any given third party, but you can push it out to a bunch of third parties and hope the good stuff happens. And ideally over time, I guess, protocol improves so that good stuff is easier to coordinate, even though there's nobody in particular who owns and runs it. So the idea that like a micro relay should exist or would exist seems attractive, and that it could connect to other relays. But probably it's a bit more of an advanced user topic for early. So if you were running an Umbrel and you had one and you said, hey, DK, like throw me a few sats, and like you can also manage you can just connect to me, my relay, and then I'll get you out to the other 8 or 12 or whoever you want. That seems like a really good user experience. Maybe solves your kind of grandma problem as you posed it. But yeah, I don't know. Kind of beyond that, like, do those micro relays play a different role in the ecosystem? Is it mostly around kind of like your own sovereignty and ability to manage it, or are there other?
Well, so the way I kind of think about this when I hear this is we talked last week about Cloudflare and like caching services, right? And I definitely think that, you're going to have some relays that have all of the information, and you probably want some other service in there to help filter. Like if you could just get the giant data stream, you're going to get all the dick pics and all that. Most people don't want that. They want filtering, they want algos. And so maybe one answer is that for the super advanced users, they'll just do it all themselves, but most people are not going to be that advanced. And so there's going to be these kind of like, more middleware guys, maybe, or opportunities. Maybe they had the algorithm, but also they combine some other filtering and caching services to make sure you have high uptime and reliability. The way I kind of think about it as you speak is that maybe in this world, it's important that incentives are aligned so that maybe adversarial is not the right way to say it, but like it's clear that there's someone representing the user, right? So maybe relays are going to pop up and they're going to be really, try and be really big businesses. And maybe they'll start off really well intentioned, but eventually the incentives will play out such that they want as much data as possible to monopolize. And maybe they end up serving ads to the users, whatever. And so if we want this thing to be as beautiful as it can be, someone's got to be on the user behalf, like making sure that they're getting open access to algorithms, that they're getting the kind of filters and feeds they want.
Right.
And so maybe one idea is you'll have some that are purely commercial services, but maybe you'll also have some that are somewhat more community minded, and they'll still be businesses, but more kind of like community banking, in the same way that something like Fedimint or Galoy allows any community to become their own bank. I could see various communities, either physically or online located, where maybe they have their own micro relays and caching services. As an example, let's say you're part of, I don't know, some affinity group or a religious group or whatever, or a town, and you say, okay, like, we hook into our Galoy or Fedimint bank, and we also hook into our town relay. And it's a micro relay, and we trust the people in our town that are managing this, that they're going to like, hook in, they're going to find us the best cost.
Yep.
They're going to filter based on what we want to see or don't see. And they're going to kind of advocate for us a little bit against the big major relay players and client players that come up. It could also be the Uncle Jim model, where someone runs the Umbrella and they also run, the micro relay for you. It could be more of like a community bank model. In the long run, what I would love to see one day, and I think we're probably a decade away or maybe 2 decades away from this, is once compute gets cheap enough, and I know we have this debate that there's always a frontier, but maybe one day you could do it all on your phone, right? Maybe one day you'll be able to run your own micro relay and algorithm services all on your phone. Like, so you have on your phone the keys to your Bitcoin, the keys to your identity, and your own basically AI that filters and potentially, finds the relays for you. Probably that's going to be, while we go through the AI learning curve, as you said, 2 decades out. I don't know. But I think in the midterm, it would be really nice to have services that advocate on behalf of the user.
Yeah. And I think that's an exciting future. And I wouldn't have skepticism that could be done on phones from a kind of technology perspective, because, with AI, there's so much data needed to be able to, it's closer to search in that sense.
Right.
Like you need everything in one place to be able to sort of make the kinds of decisions that an AI would. And so I think even if the decisions being made today can be pushed out to a lightweight device, there's always going to be a frontier of stuff that, is more exciting or more attractive that the servers, the server version is going to do better. But I think the biggest challenge with this, even though I think from a compute and technology perspective, it should be fine, I think the biggest challenge is going to be that, Apple has a pretty big position in the device landscape, and running background stuff is not going to be very reliable, unless Apple were to adopt a very different computing model that doesn't seem likely.
Apple Relay incoming.
I don't know that I want to bet a future on that. It's kind of too much of a deeper systemic change that would be required. So, but I don't know. Maybe there's it's been proposed again and again, and maybe the time will finally come when a third contender, the Apple Android and the dark horse number 3 comes out. And I know of some privacy oriented projects that are going after that, but have you heard anything recently from people working on kind of a up and comer, the dark horse, would it be called? In
Well, I think this is an absolutely great point. And if I'm thinking, again, with my investor hat on, like every once in a while you get a big seismic shift in technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
The landscapes really shift. I think we're going through one right now. I think certainly Nostr and Bitcoin represent one together. Maybe AI is, maybe it's not. We'll find out. But I think certainly Nostr plus AI, plus Bitcoin and Lightning is one of those technology shifts. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you get one of those big shifts, there is an opportunity to build one of these generational companies, a Microsoft, Apple, Google type company, right? And so I obviously am very, like you, obsessed with search and discovery. That's my number one priority as an investor. Anyone that's out there working on that's my number one priority. But I would say the more I think about this, my number 2 priority is is there a chance to build an Apple right now? I think that if I were going after this, everything that I've seen, stuff like Prism, whatever, it's very cool, but I don't think privacy is the right way to do it. I think privacy is amazing, and there is a market for it. For sure, Proton Mail, other companies have shown signal that there's a market for it, and that market is growing. However, I think it's a really nice feature, but I don't think it's the killer thing. To me, the killer thing is access to this open economy where new apps are just so fucking cool that if you're not in this new ecosystem, you're like, well, my friend here is getting paid instantly around the world and is making enough money that he can now do X, Y, and Z things. Right. Why can't I? Right. And so I think, kind of like we talked about last time, privacy is amazing and it's a selling point, but the big selling point for Nostr and this whole movement is open. Access to new applications that are so sweet and so either economically lucrative or just cool that are not possible in the old world ecosystems. That's where I think you can see one of these big companies come. The best example I've seen to date is Umbrel. I love Umbrel, and I think that they're very early, and they're focused on home servers, not necessarily mobile yet. But their philosophy is very much kind of in the same way that we went from mainframe computers to personal computers, we'll go from mainframe centralized servers to personal servers. Maybe agree with that, maybe don't, but it's a really nice vision. I do think there's an opportunity for someone to come in and build an Apple type of company based on this idea that you can access an open world that the old guys are going to be too late to adopt.
Right. And when you say an Apple-like opportunity, you mean a hardware-focused...
Right. Like a company that could become one of the giants of selling not only computational services, but actual computational hardware as well.
And so far, I guess Umbrel is a server, like a home server version of that. Do you think that it ultimately looks like a home server, or do you think there are opportunities even in would there be a new device that's not an Android iOS device that kind of does everything you need and has the ability to access this cool new apps in ways that maybe that are more limited in the traditional?
Who knows? I mean, I think the coolest thing would be mobile, obviously, because I think everyone is kind of going mobile for better or for worse.
Meaning mobile hardware.
Yeah, mobile hardware, like something that, on my phone or my contact lenses, whatever ends up being the computational substrate of the future, I can access an open ecosystem versus not. I think in the short term, one thing I'm very bullish on is finding some way to integrate Umbrel and maybe even a Lightning node as well with some kind of hardware that you're already used to. So one example would be, Umbrel today is amazing because it's an operating system that I can run wherever. If I want to get the Raspberry, I could. They sell their own machines, although there's been some slowages there because of supply chain issues in China and whatnot, or I can just run it on an old computer or a server, whatever. But I think that imagine if you want this thing to go mainstream in the medium term, and call it the next 5 years. I think the way to do it would be just to like have your server and Lightning node embedded with like your Wi-Fi router.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe a company like Block, I mean, they have hardware. Maybe they could do something like this, but just something that people are already used to. Everyone has a Wi-Fi router. And if it was just kind of came preloaded with like, okay, now here's your, your Lightning node and computer on top of that, that could be interesting.
Is there any way to take like either the Umbrella software or others in like if you don't want to do the Raspberry and don't want to have your own, internet connection as a point that you have to rely on, can you fire it up on AWS?
You can, yeah. I haven't tried that
set up to do that.
Yeah, I know when I originally invested in those guys before my fund, that was not a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't tried it yet, but I know last year they did a release that made it easier to run on computers, and I believe on just like AWS or GCP instances. So that should be possible. Maybe someone can validate me that they've done it out there. But yeah, I don't see why not.
Cool. Yeah, I would like to see that future where there's more people kind of, managing their own compute, but I think it has to be very like turnkey in order for it to get outside of the, the people who like to hack and play with it and do it for kind of fun.
One more thing I want to throw out there, which is I think a point you made, and I think what is so beautiful about Nostr is it is open, and it's open and decentralized because of its openness, but it's not peer-to-peer. And I actually think that's a really beautiful thing. I, back in the day, used to play with Urbit. Did you ever play with Urbit?
I know of it. I've never actually had it.
Many of you guys will probably know Urbit. This is like one crazy project, started development 20 years ago, got some major backers, and then just got really, really slow. And it's kind of, I would say, got this interesting cult following where it's kind of like a cool piece of technology. It's very artistic as well. It's kind of one of those like, if you know kind of things, but like unclear if they'll ever make it usable enough to go mainstream. The challenge is that if you're doing completely peer-to-peer, even today after, decade plus of development, it's still like my even technical friends and I, it's hard to run, They've made huge strides, but like it's still a pain to have to sync up with everybody else. And so what I love about a Umbrella style app store plus Nostr based apps is that because it's still a client server model, but the servers are like whatever servers I want to hook up into, I think it's a lot more realistic that could scale to 8 billion people.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think the habits, though, I guess to run Urbit, I would need to run it on a local piece of hardware, you think? Or?
I think you can run it in the cloud as well. Obviously, that becomes less like, fulfilling its original intent. But yeah, you could.
Because I just worry about the fact that, my primary computing device, besides my phone, is a laptop, which I close and I bring it places. And if I'm offline, like I almost feel like that 20 years ago thing, we all just had like wirelined internet to like a big box sitting in our house that was available to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And the new model, even outside of mobile, the new computing model, I think it's very common for people to use laptops that are on and off throughout the day. So.
100%. And when I was running it, and again, it's really cool. Like shout out to those guys. They've done cool work. But every time I would close my laptop and then try and log in, it's like, all right, go back to the freaking command line. Like it was just a pain in the ass. And people are.
Pain in the ass doesn't really scale that well.
Exactly. Agreed.
To like the typical user.
Yeah.
Okay. A few other things. Anything else on micro relays or?
No, I think it's a great question, and let's watch and see what happens.
Yeah. A few other things that I've got on this list here. So, did you see the Camary's pay to relay?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
That looked cool, and I think ZBD also launched something. So
yeah,
Camary launched this thing. It's pay to relay is here. So 3 steps: add a relay that he operates called eden.nostr.land to your relays, and then visit https://eden.nostr.land and follow the prompts to pay. And he is actually soliciting for feedback on the terms of service because he's written some terms of service, but he's asking you don't just click through and accept it, actually read it, give feedback, because he wants to try to, I assume he's trying to kind of create a reasonable terms of service that may be open and usable by other people, but it should actually be, a topic of debate, not just here's what you get, but here's, part of the discussion. So that's one. And then number 3 is enjoy a 99.99% spam-free relay.
Yeah. I did it.
You did it. Oh,
Yeah.
so tell me about it. What was your experience?
It was super easy. I mean, and shout out to Kamari. I mean, this guy is also, he's one of these devs that's on fire, just shipping and shipping. Yeah, I mean, and I need to read the term service even more closely, but I did want to at least experiment with it and see what it looked like.
Was there anything in the terms that you disagreed with?
No, and to be clear, I didn't read it closely enough as he asked. So I'm sorry, Kamari, I need to get back in there. But I did just want to just see what was the user flow like, and you basically
should set up a bounty on Stacker News to get people to read the terms of service and
that's a great
see
idea.
what they want to argue
Kamari,
about.
I think you're a Stacker News user. If you're doing that, you should give that a shot, and that'd be really cool. But anyways, the user flow is super easy. I go to this website, I get hit with a 5,000 Satoshi invoice. I paid it from Breeze, and that was it. And then I got a DM from, I guess, his the bot from his relay that says you're in.
And how long is that valid? Is that a month?
I think it's forever. I could be wrong.
5,000 sats forever.
Tell me if I'm wrong. I think it was like a one-time payment.
And you can both read and write from that.
I'm not sure on the writing, but definitely reading.
So it's mostly to help you, filter spam so that you can read high quality stuff.
And maybe it's writing too. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but definitely the use case that I see is I don't want to get dick pics.
Right. what was I unfortunately was, I forget where I was offline for some reason last week on D-Day.
Yeah.
And so I kind of came in late and saw all the chatter about it, but I didn't see the thing. So what is the thing? What happened?
I actually, like you, was also, I guess, away that day. So I didn't see, I remember maybe 2 weeks ago, I saw my first vagina on there, and I was like, okay,
oh yeah.
this thing is happening.
Got that in DMs.
Yeah, that's good. The dick pics, I actually haven't seen a dick on there yet, but I saw that a lot of people were joking about it. And someone, I think it was Jack, actually, it was pretty funny. He posted like, hey, post a picture of a dick, and he posted a picture of Craig Wright, which is kind of funny. But that's all I saw. And but it definitely just shows that, look, spammers are coming. Any network with like any number of eyeballs, of course they're going to be there. And most people probably just don't want that shit in their feed.
Right. And so Kamari has a good result. Are there things that you would want to see experimented with that maybe he hasn't gotten to yet, or what other kinds of, what edges would you like to explore there?
Well, I think one thing that's interesting, just as like a meta question, is, right now I'm hooked up to a whole bunch of relays, like 20 or 21 relays from my Damus, and that is kind of resource intensive and probably not like long-term scalable.
Yep.
One thing that's tricky right now, and I think this is a debate people have been having, I forgot if it was MVK or someone put this on there, is like, how much should the note be tied to a specific relay, right? Like right now, it's not at all apparent to me. Like when I read in Damus, I just have my feed, or I have like so-and-so's notes, right? I have no idea if this note that I'm reading is being queried from Kamari's relay,
right,
or Damus's relay. I have no idea.
Right.
So to be frank, I haven't seen any change in my experience because I'm on so many relays to begin with.
Right. Yeah, and I think like which relays you're on and how we think about relays probably needs a little bit of evolution.
Totally.
Because I think today you're like, okay, I just signed up for Damus and I just took whatever 8 they gave me. I don't know, like, why should I do anything else? I'm just here to figure what this is all about. I think I saw a note, maybe it was from Fiat Joff this morning, where he was saying he doesn't necessarily like the framing of like my relay, or these are my relays. These are the relays I use, but more like, here's some relays. So you're meaning like maybe if you have like too tight a coupling between your experience and a given relay that you don't control, that might actually be not super healthy. So it's nicer if you're like, I publish out to a bunch of places, I read from a bunch of different places. They don't necessarily need to be overlapping. I think today we have this model of like, I publish to a relay that I think is good, and I also read from it. Maybe I do it for 6 or 8, whatever Damus suggested. But the idea of like, I publish to my personal one, and then that publishes to 6 or 8 or 12. I don't know the right number. And then I pull down stuff. I ask Max's Umbrel running the right app, and I ask mine to go find some. But I ask other ones, sort of like interrogate the system, because I think we don't have a protocol level coordination thing for that.
And someone else, in a great note, I think we have this on our list as well, is like, how do you find, so there's not only the friend discovery, but there's also the relay discovery, and those are very tightly coupled. But like, I forgot, someone launched this week, I think we have it in there, let's see.
We have lots of notes here.
I know, we have a lot it's under here, this guy, relay recommendation. It's called, what's the website?
This is nostrgraph.net.
Nostrgraph.net. So this is kind of cool. Basically, you can put in your pub key,
You
and
want me to
they'll.
pull this up on screen share?
Sure. Yeah. Actually. Oh, sorry. I thought that was on screen. Yeah.
Let me pull this.
I thought this was a pretty cool. I forget the guy that developed this. I think it's on there, but.
You gotta go to this and then.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So let me just. Sorry, I'm doing my little video production stuff.
DK's multitasking.
Now we're streaming.
Yeah.
What we see in this browser.
So you can put any pub key in there and then get recommendations. And it'll basically say, based on the people that you follow, here are the relays that they're posting to, and you want to make sure you're following.
So this is a default npub.
Mm-hmm.
So this is somebody's public key.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's Waco Inc.
Maybe the creator of that
Yeah.
app. Or
Best coverage relay set. So when selected together, these relays will provide increased event coverage.
Mhm.
So help us understand more about what's going on here. This talks about event coverage, 85%, 72%, 87%. Is that of all new events, how many of those events are?
I'm not sure. I
covered
thought
here?
it was the sort of core thesis was of people you follow, like their events,
Oh, okay.
but I'm not positive on that.
So somehow this service
Or
knows
this
about
could be of
events.
all events right now, or all events that they index. But
Right. So I guess we could run the experiment of, okay, what I'm going to do here.
okay,
We're doing this real
we're doing
time.
it live, baby.
Why not? I'm going to pop over to grab my pub key here.
Cool. David's about to show you his private key.
And I'm going to drop that in, and let's see if we get recommendations if the numbers are the same. Now I can't remember. Are the numbers the same?
Yeah, they look the same.
I think they look. This is the default. 72, 85, 87, 89, 91. Yeah, I think they're the same.
I think they're the
right?
same. So it's probably of all global stuff that they're indexing.
Yeah.
But you could easily see it growing to be of specific people.
Right. Yep. So that's kind of cool. That kind of touches on a little bit discovery related topics, and a little bit, relay, micro relays kind of are maybe a piece within that.
Yeah.
Cool. Was there some? Sorry, I'm trying to pop the stack where we're looking at relay recommendations. That was a way to find relays.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard any chatter about what relay recommendation algorithms or kind of protocol level things might look like, or is that a topic of discussion right now, or not really?
Well, I think people are obviously playing with it, right? I think, based off of social discovery is probably the thing that makes the most sense to me. I mean, again, we're probably in the Yahoo days where it's honestly just like whatever Thomas Pooch points you to, or like these 10, or like frankly, whatever Jack is following, probably, given he's kind of, whether he means to or not, serving as a bit of the global coordinator right now of like who to follow, who he follows, that sort of thing. But I do think really quickly, as the network grows, you're going to need to find where your friends are. So I think Nostr Directory has a good spot for that because they kind of know who's already on there. But
Is Nostr Directory, is it manually curated?
Yeah, it's Nostr Directory. It's pretty good. This is what everyone, like when Jack did his infamous tweet about Nostr Directory. Yeah, there you go.
Find your Twitter follows on Nostr. So tweet your Nostr pub key, verify your pub key on Nostr.
And then you go down, and these are all like various people. You can find their Twitter account, and then it will have.
What does it mean when it's red versus green?
Verified or not. So verified, there's a couple of different. I think verified in this case is if you have
Linked to a Twitter.
5. Yeah, or actually it may be. I don't know if that's verified from NIP5 or verified from a tweet, but one of those. Vitalik is on there.
Vitalik is the second most. So that's probably some. I assume that's a fake profile.
No, it's real. He got on there and just
did?
tweeted, "Is this working?"
Oh, okay.
And that was it. Yeah,
So you think that's really the real Vitalik?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, he's not verified. And this guy also has a Web of Trust score. It's very crude right now, very early, but it's like if you verify yourself on Twitter, that's 10 points. If you do a NIP5, that's 10 points.
Yep. I see. So there's some people who are legitimately on here who may not be verified.
That's right.
Seeing it as not verified just means it hasn't been verified with this service.
That's right. Or with their tweet. Yeah.
With a tweet with a NIP5.
One or the other. I'm not sure what that verification is, but those are the two. And each of those get you points in their algorithm. Got
it. And so do you see this as like a, oh, sorry, I wasn't screen sharing. We're just playing on the web. Do you see this as, is this like a discovery is this an approach to building a discovery business, or is this
Could
like
be.
a new relay operator, or what is this?
No, I mean, I had a conversation with him about a week ago, and
Who's the person built this?
I forget his name, but he's been in Nostr for a while. He's done a couple other services. I think he had one on like Lightning Tips, like where you could pay people micro payments to do various services.
Mhm.
Anyways, sharp dude, and yeah, he launched this a while ago, and obviously got a lot of attention for it when Jack used it to verify himself.
I see.
But I did as well. I think you did too. You can find yourself on there. If you tweeted on Twitter like, here's my Nostr pub key.
I have my pub key in my bio on Twitter, but I didn't write a tweet with it.
Oh, well then you got to do it to be on there to get the 10 points in their algo.
Is that no longer going to get me banned from Twitter? I don't know that I'm fully ready to be banned.
Nah, you're not going to get banned.
Cool. What else? We talked a little bit about Nostrica. We want to figure out where we're going to stay, and we've got a book soon.
Yeah.
We've got this Diffusion of Power piece by Jonathan Geller. Did you get a chance to read that?
No.
It's good. I had written this tweet the other day, or no, sorry, it was a note. It was not a tweet. That basically, like, I forget how I phrased it, but it's kind of, I don't want a new king. I just want no king. Signed David King. But
Apropos.
that Jonathan picked that up and wrote kind of a more extensive piece about his concerns with the centralization, kind of coordination of power, and sort of how it impacts, in government and religion. And, he grew up in Venezuela, so he's like very,
He gets it.
he gets it, right? And then he's worked at big tech, so he's at Facebook, and he has seen how power moves and how it corrupts situations, and I think he has like a good handle on that, and a good kind of appropriate skepticism. And he's a Bitcoiner and stuff. So he had a really nice piece that was kind of a more extensive explanation of, I think, what I was getting at.
Cool. Check it out.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, have you gotten him on Nostr yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. He's gotten on. I think he's very busy with a lot of things. So I think he's a hardcore Bitcoiner for a long time. Like, definitely gets all of that and believes in that. And then I think with the Nostr stuff, I think his first reaction was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Like, seems, I don't get, like, tell me more, right? It's like, so he kind of got on, but it feels a little bit just like, oh, it's another Twitter.
Yeah.
But then we actually had dinner on Wednesday. We sat down and talked about it. Okay, here's what clients are. Here's what relays are. Here's why this is a new architecture. It has like different control points. Then,
You know what I think the magic moment is for a lot of these users? And again, I want to wait until everything is super secure so I don't accidentally get people pwned. But I think the magic moment is when you create your identity in one app.
Yep.
You take that private key, ideally with Alby or something secure, and then you log into a completely different client.
Yep.
And then you keep your follows and your graph, and now you see a new interface. I think that's the magic moment.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, agreed.
So
I think
anyone looking to purple pill.
yeah. I think also not one thing I've been trying to do, and even when I see people come on the fire hose, I think, there's obvious philosophical and kind of cultural alignment with a lot of Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to dismiss Nostr as just the place where Bitcoiners hang out. Like, there's a bunch of people on Twitter who talk about X, and there's a bunch of people in various Discords who talk about Y, and then there's, Nostr where a bunch of Bitcoiners hang out. Which like, I get why people would say that.
Yeah.
But I try to share, and I've shared this on Nostr to new users who I've interacted with, is like, Bitcoin is not Nostr, Nostr is not Bitcoin. These are very different ideas, and they just happen to share some similar philosophical underpinnings. So there's a lot of people who got excited about Bitcoin who see Nostr and are excited about it, not because it is Bitcoin, but that it has, a similarly, it's solving a different problem, but it has a similar set of principles of sort of lack of control, lack of centralization, not just in name, but in like this, it's a different technology that solves it structurally in a different way. It's not a blockchain.
No game.
It's not a money. It's not a token. it's an architectural change. And so I think helping people see, like, I've even said on, I see people coming in on the fire hose, and I sort of, sometimes welcome and say hi, and I say, like, welcome to your new home on the internet.
I love that.
But I also say, like, hey, like, you don't have to like Bitcoin to care about Nostr. You don't have to believe in Bitcoin. Like, if you find it, you'll find a lot of Bitcoiners around here, but that doesn't mean you have to like it. You might hate Bitcoin. You might be really turned off by all of that. That's totally fine. Like, I think use Bitcoin if and when you find it useful. And if you don't find it useful, it's fine.
No
you don't
worries.
need to use it. But it's nice to be able to have a new architecture for publishing independent of Bitcoin that allows people to publish without needing trusted third parties.
I agree 100%. And I do think that, obviously the Bitcoiners that are there today, I think we've talked about how they're separate but very symbiotic, the value rank stuff. A lot of really beautiful things will come from them working together. But I am really excited, like, again, as I mentioned earlier, to start seeing people on there, maybe like I expect to see Lynn posting more about just macro in general, not just Bitcoin, right?
Yep.
And so as we get more of these Bitcoiners that have other interests forming their own communities, I hope to see other clients and algos that maybe say, hey, how do we onboard, a user that just doesn't want to talk about Bitcoin, but still gets a great experience here? And I think that'll happen. It's natural, but the question is, will it be in a week, a month, 6 months? I don't know.
And the more that we can help it happen sooner, the better it is for Nostr, better it is for anybody, who's playing in the ecosystem and wants to see these kinds of changes.
Yeah. I agree.
So cool. What else? Anything else jump out at you from our list?
I think we covered a lot today.
Covered a lot, yeah.
I feel pretty good about it.
We didn't do Larry Chain.
I talked a little bit about it. Honestly, I don't think we need to talk about it. Like, it's kind of like, as I said, like, someone was very crude in how they ripped off JB55. Hopefully they learned their lesson.
Yeah. But Larry Chain's like an NFT or something, is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was a scam looping me into it, and then I think maybe it's not. I'm not sure.
I don't know all the details. All I know is, like, the Stacks dude that just ripped him off in, like, a very uncouth way.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't mean to. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him, but it was just like, it came across as, like, really kind of shitty.
Yeah.
And then came forward kind of pumping some Stacks NFTs. And
oh, I see.
I think a lot of the Bitcoiners, and I tend to agree, just kind of see Stacks as like an affinity scam kind of.
Right.
And so anyways, that's a longer conversation. But the point is, they then kind of had this idea that they took one of his NFTs. I think it was just a JPEG. It's kind of like a little bullying. So I don't want to like get bullying, but like they basically are like, hey, instead of like selling this NFT, you have to, I will pay you to take this like burden off my hands. And they called it Larry Chain, like passing around this like little monster.
Okay.
Anyways, point is, like, just be a good person. Don't be shitty.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good lesson that we should all internalize and take down.
It was kind of funny though. I mean, whatever.
If you're gonna be Pura Vida, right?
Yeah, exactly. Be Pura Vida, positive vibes. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think so. We covered a lot. Coming up, you're going to be traveling, so the rest of this week we will see no more Max.
You never know.
Maybe
we'll make a surprise.
Chime in. We are going to have Artur. We're going to talk about relays and building relays and sort of what.
That's awesome.
What he's thinking about, and he's got a lot of these topics. Discovery, search, people discovery, relay building, middleware. All of that is stuff that he cares about a lot. So we're going to talk live stream 9 a.m. Pacific, I think is what we settled on Wednesday.
Cool.
That'll happen. And I'm actually curious. I almost want to see if like Kamari can come up and better represent this micro relays idea. Cause I feel like there's something there and I don't know that we've really covered it well enough. I think there's probably more there. So I'll see if I can DM him and see if we can set up a chat.
Yeah. I've got a couple other folks I would love to, we've talked about bring on maybe next week as well. So
yeah, let's do it. We may have callers by then. So
man, we're getting advanced here. Hey, as DK said, every week something a little bit better.
Make something a little better. Yeah. Pretty soon you won't have to look at my dirty or clean laundry just off camera there. We have piles of clean laundry that need to be put away, but
maybe I won't chug a tea before we come over next time too. Just micro improvements,
little improvements each week and we'll get there. Okay. Well, thanks so much everybody for coming by and
thanks for